There's a question that we get at Strategies all the time, and it's, what's a good commission rate to pay a starting stylist or esthetician, nail tech, massage therapist, whatever? And we always answer it the same way, that you're asking the wrong question. And with Facebook and discussion boards and social media, it's, I kind of cringe when I start looking at the responses that are typically given to the question because, well, we have a sliding scale and we go from here to there, or we like to start them at, 40% or 45%, and we have a service charge or a product cost deduction and whatnot. And the reason that I say it's the wrong question is because the right question is, what can your business afford to pay? And it's not so much what the commission rate is. I mean, that's part of the issue here, but it's what can your business afford in payroll to pay for service providers and still leave some for admin, guest services, customer support, and officer salary, because, kind of sort of you want to get paid too. So let's look at that question. What's a good starting commission, or what's a good commission rate to pay? If I just come out and say, 40%. Well, then you may say, well, everyone around me is paying 50 or higher, or they pay 45, or they have sliding scale. So, that won't work. Or what if I said, how about this? How about 30 or 35% commission? And you may go, well, that's crazy. I'll never get anybody to work for that. But if we say, what can your business, if you're looking at your profit and loss statement, or you're looking at a cash flow projection, of revenue and projected expenses, what payroll fits your financial reality? That's a very different question and seriously more accurate than what commission rate can you afford to pay, because your rent may be higher than someone that's answering the question for you. Your other overhead expenses may be higher. You may have a percentage rent based on where you're at. You may be a franchise that has a franchise fee that you have to pay off the top line. So it's understanding your financial reality and what makes sense for you. So let me give you a couple of examples here. What we have found over the years is a good range for service payroll, meaning if hands do the work, a good range on a profit and loss statement is 30 to 35% of gross revenues, which means service sales plus retail sales equals total sales, total revenue. 30 to 35% of that number is an affordable, realistic payroll percentage for service providers. Now, what we typically get for an immediate response is, well, you're saying 30, 35% commission. That's not what we said. It's 30, 35% of total service and retail sales. It's a different number that we're discussing here. And what you also have to look at is if you're paying commission and you have sliding scales. So they start here, and if they do this, and they can go to this commission. And if they do this, they can go to this commission. And then we have price increases and this whole thing. Well, at the end of the day, that whole sliding scale level system still gives you a percentage service payroll on your profit and loss statement. That's your financial reality. And if that number is running over 35%, which we red flag, if you're running at 40% or higher, we really red flag it, storm warning flags. If it's 50%, you got a major payroll crisis. You've got a cash flow crisis, which means half of every dollar or service dollar that comes into your company is going right out in service payroll, and we haven't even gotten to front desk admin or officer's salary. Front desk admin kind of runs, what we typically see is 10% or less, or plus or minus 10%. So what I want you to think about when it comes to asking the question, what is an affordable or a good commission rate, is to not ask what's the commission rate. It's to look at your profit and loss statement and determine what is that acceptable wiggle room, low end, high end, that service payroll can live at and still put money on the bottom line in your company. And I can just tell you from all the years that we've been coaching salon spas, that magic number benchmark is between 30 and 35% of total service and retail sales. If you're running higher, you need to make a change in your payroll system. That's the other issue. If you're paying commission, you just can't put in service charges. You may not be able to put in a service charge or product cost deduction high enough to get your payroll in line. Having new employees come in and trying to do it through attrition could be very costly over time because of how long it's going to take to create such a change. So, from a financial standpoint, one of the benefits of the team-based pay system that we teach at Strategies is let's cap your payroll. Let's put everyone on an hourly rate that's equal to what their hourly rate is on commission. And remember, commission is still an hourly rate. If someone works 40 hours a week and they make $1,000 a week, you divide the 1,000 by 40 and you come up with an hourly rate. So even people working on commission work on an hourly rate. If they're busy, it's a high hourly rate. If they're slow, it's a low hourly rate. It's variable. So what we do in a payroll conversion is we cap your sales, and then we use systems, pre-book, client retention, our happiness system on the proper close to a service experience to create a pre-book and a future sale. And we cap your payroll, we drive sales, the payroll percent comes down. And we've been doing this for years, and we've been very successful at it. I just returned from a private incubator course that we did with the Woodhouse Spas at their corporate office in Victoria, Texas. And it was a private incubator for a group of franchisees. And one of the pieces of information that the Woodhouse team gave us was the research that they put into team-based pay and understanding that any of their franchises that are on team-based pay have a profit margin, have a bottom line net profit that is at least 10% higher than their Woodhouse spas that pay commission. And this equates to another $100,000 or $200,000 in bottom line profit that the team-based pay Woodhouse spas have versus their commission counterparts, doing the same revenue with the same other expenses like rent and utilities and whatever, but it's that payroll piece. And that's why Woodhouse Spas has endorsed our team-based pay system for all new opening franchises in the future. So think about your payroll percent. Think about what you do or can't do to manage the payroll percent as it appears on your profit and loss statement. And if that payroll percent of total service and retail sales exceeds 35% of gross revenue, it is a red flag that you need to do something, and do something relatively fast to gain control over your compensation system to bring that payroll cost down, not necessarily in dollars, but to bring it down as a percent. And just one other thing before I wrap this segment, if your service payroll is running 40% or higher of total sales, chances are you're in that industry average, 3, 4, 5% of net profit. And your company can't fund itself, and it can't fund activity, and it can't fund growth if all it's putting is 3, 4, 5% net profit on the bottom line. Even worse is if you continue to operate at break even. Payroll is the elephant in the living room, and you really, as a leader and an owner, you need to learn how to control it.